We are on the cusp of a major social change. Do you feel it? Even if you don't, make no mistake, change is coming, and it is going to be unforgettable. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Hart, and here on Prime Spark, where we work with and on behalf of women over 55, I want to help you find that spark that will ignite your way forward, reflect your gifts to the world, and illuminate your path through this next stage of life. Through these podcast conversations, I hope to inspire you to see how you can make a significant contribution to some of the gnarly problems that are facing us right now. Join me, and together let's discover our Prime Spark. Hi, and welcome to Prime Spark. I'm Sarah Hart, and I'm so happy you're here with us. Prime Spark is designed for women over 55 or close, with a goal to help us all live our happiest, most fulfilling and productive lives, now and in the future. The mission of Prime Spark is to change the way our society sees and treats older women. That's a big mission, which only means we all need to be involved and we need to get going now. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Erin-Kate Whitcomb, a woman whose work I greatly admire. Erin-Kate Whitcomb has delivered exceptional operational and sales results with leadership roles in multiple industries. Her visionary, inclusive, and collaborative approach is aimed at building cultures of integrity and results necessary for any growth-focused company. Balancing honesty with humor, she provides tools for improved communication with particular expertise in bridging the gap between Gen X and millennials. She also is an award-winning playwright and stage actor, and is a voiceover artist, and most importantly, is the mother of two incredible 20-something sons. Welcome, Erin-Kate. I'm so happy you're here with us today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's a delight to be here with you.
So just getting started, Erin-Kate, let me ask you, do you experience getting older? And if you do, what is that experience? And if you don't, why is it that you think that you don't?
I like this question. As much as I hate it, I like it. I experience getting older as, of course, there's the physical things. And those are, the things that I used to be able to do, be a sprite and hop around and do funny physical comedy and things like that. And also just things like playing tennis and, doing outdoorsy things are a little harder now than they were. But I have to say, given that, I really, really am enjoying wisdom and trying to put together something out of a life of experience and to look ahead and see where I can apply that wisdom going forward, because I think I've got another several decades in there. In fact, I'm certain of it. I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in 2020, and I knew it wasn't my time, and I dug in even harder to put this age thing to work for me and make some decisions that I think I was avoiding for a long time. So I think just sort of teeing up the future is how I'm experiencing aging right now.
Oh, I love that, Erin-Kate. It's teeing up the future. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I talk to a lot of women, and generally speaking, I mean, when I ask them that question or a similar question, or they most of the time react like you did, that yeah, physically I can't do exactly what I used to do in the way I used to do it, and that's a bummer, and da 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 da. But other than that, I feel better than I ever have, and I'm really looking forward to the future, So I think, it's a given anymore that women in their 50s can easily imagine living another 30, 40 years. And so that's an entire adult lifetime. So what are we going to do with that time? And
Exactly.
But to think about the development of wisdom and experience and is really good because the world certainly needs it right now.
Well, and I was also raised in a family of a lot of strong women, and both of my grandmothers lived to be 96 and 98.
Love it.
And so I see past the horizon because of that. And I know people who have lost parents earlier in their lives, and they feel like there's a timeline on them that I just simply don't have.
Well, it's I'm sure you know this by now. I mean, it's well publicized by now, but that the attitude we have toward aging has a huge impact on not only major health things, but actually on longevity. So, you feel positive about getting older, you may live 7.5 years longer because of that. That's a long time.
Well, I have a little, just if I can just interject an anecdotal story about getting older. When I was in college, I was 19 in the theater department, and I had this advisor who was, an old drinker, and he would take me to the student union and he'd buy me a glass of wine and we'd have our sessions. He told me that I was going to be the next Eve Arden, and that I was going to live a life as an actor doing the work, but I was really going to grow into my kingdom when I was in my 50s. And at that time, I thought, I am going to die. Like, I have to wait till I'm in my 50s. This is not fitting the plan. I was supposed to get an Oscar when I was 24 and a Tony when I was 26, because, Tonys are harder to get. So this didn't fit my plan, but I did neatly tuck it into my future. And here I am coming up on 58. And I want to call Kip and check in with him and say, my number's up. So what do I need to do to activate, to punch the clock? So, thinking about things in the future and plotting your life over time, I think it's great to have something to look forward to. And that to me has always been something to look forward to. So aging to me meant I was getting closer to that.
I love that. Oh, that's wonderful, Erin-Kate. I love that story. What acting are you doing acting now?
I am still an actor. Yes. I work less because I'm doing so much with my own business the last few years. And since COVID, things are sort of slow to come back. I was an understudy for 3 different roles in the San Francisco Playhouse production of Follies. So had to learn a 6-minute tap number and 2 different positions in the tap number that had a full stage of people. So that was fun. And 3 different tracks of lines and songs and all that. And I never went on, but I was delighted to just be working in the space and being back in the theater. So I think I'm going to be dusting that all off for the general. They call these general auditions, where you audition for multiple theater companies at the same time. And I'll be doing that in February 2024, and hopefully booking a couple of things for the year.
2024. Okay, so you still will only be 58, 59. So, you're still within your time frame.
Yep. Just got to make the cut here.
And you also say you're a playwright.
Yes, I had been a playwright. I was asked to write a play for a theater company in San Francisco when I was about 35. And they asked for me to perform it. So it was going to be a 1-woman show starring me, written by me, directed by them. Was nervous about that, having never written a 1-woman show, and the idea of like transitions, getting on and off the stage and changing characters and all that just seemed complicated. And so I asked if I could write a 2-person play, and I did. And the play was it was basically my best friend who had lost to AIDS when we were about a few years before that, and driving his ashes to his mother's house in Michigan from San Francisco. And so I had somebody else playing me, essentially driving the ashes across the country. And she was listening to tapes that he had made her about where to go and where to stop. And I played everybody that she ran into along the way.
And did you present it?
Yeah, so that ran for about 5 weeks in San Francisco. It was scheduled for 3 and it got extended twice. And I was nominated for Best New Play in San Francisco. I was nominated for an Ovation Award in Los Angeles. Also won an award with Bay Area Theater Critics Circle, both as a playwright and as an actor. It was sure fun, I have to say. And I was working full time at a hospital and was the manager of Department of Pediatrics, and literally would just get in the car after work and drive to the theater. I would use my lunch breaks in my office to write a scene for the night. The director would tell me, we need a love scene in this. So I'd write a love scene. And because it was so clear to me what this was about, and that essentially the lead character was played by somebody else, but it was my voice, really, it was very, very easy for me to write dialogue. And I just really loved it. And it was I think became pretty adept at switching gears between work and creativity, work and art, so to speak. That has been a skill that has been developed over 30 some years of working, sitting in an office, in a corporate office for the most part, and now my own business, and going off to the theater or going to a set do a commercial or a voiceover job.
What a nice combination, though. I mean, to have a life. I haven't done the art creative part of it, but I've certainly done the corporate part of it. And those two things seem very different to me in many, many ways, and a nice balance to life.
They definitely were. And I also actively kept them siloed. People at work didn't necessarily need to know that I was an actor, and my actor friends didn't need to know that I was, a senior leader at a corporation. I tried little things to test the waters, and I was right.
It was right. You were right to keep them siloed.
Yes.
Yes. Tell me about, because I'm fascinated with your work with communication between Gen X and millennials. I am very interested in intergenerational communication. One of the things I'm interested in is trying to do away with the titles of generations, because I think that has exacerbated the problem. That's a separate issue. So how did you first get interested in that, and what is your approach to it? Because I am really interested.
One of the biggest struggles at work really comes down to communication and honestly fear. We're often protective, invulnerable at work. We need to be seen as highly productive, contributing in meetings. There's just lots of ways that we're expected to perform at work. And we have learned in I'm going to use the word, I'm sorry, Sarah, I know you don't like it, generation, the boomers and the Gen Xers, we came from this world of meritocracy, and that you worked hard, you worked long hours, you showed up early, you did working lunches, and you earned your way to wherever you were going. It was never, ever, ever going to be handed to us. We had to respect those who came before us. We had to learn from them and work our way into the position that becomes vacant when someone else has moved on. So I think, from a communication standpoint, we are sort of in some ways disabled in our ability to communicate with the next groups of work. See how I avoided generation?
You can use that word. Yeah, you can use that word.
So when the millennials came up, millennial, by the way, was an assigned term that came from essentially a 60 Minutes episode where they talked about this new generation of entitled people who felt like just coming to work was enough. And that started a massive conversation that was pointed in one direction for a very long time. If we think about this, more critically and understand how each of us came into our adulthood and the things that we gathered up to arm ourselves or to look into the future. We're all trying to figure it out. Like the worst, it's really hard to be in your 20s, for example. So the millennials, which is also Gen Y, were brought up in a generation, around 9/11, right? They were aware of 9/11 when it was happening. And there was also social media. And so there was a sense of, they needed to have a sense of psychological safety. Everyone around them was telling them this was risky and don't do this and don't do that. And, all of these things around social media, but also around politics and the world. And so the parents of that generation kept them fairly close. And this is where the term helicopter parenting came in. So while these kids are incredibly, for the most part, very smart and more worldly than I think we were, they're also were brought up with this edict to save the world and to self-advocate. I was never taught to self-advocate, and I don't know many people that were. I did it anyway because I was broken. But these younger people were taught to say what they need. And so when they bring that into the workplace, they're working in classrooms. There was a lot more project-based learning where collaboration was really important to them. They also, partly with social media, and I would need to look more into the actual studied piece of this, but the need to be liked. And I don't know that we would identify boomers as needing to be liked. We all like to be liked and like to be productive, but this is a core rooted need for millennials to need to be liked. And being liked includes things like being at the table where decisions are made and being appreciated for the contributions that they make. They feel like the people they're sitting next to that they're just as good as them. And why are they getting paid more than I am, despite any kind of years of service? So it really was pretty shocking to engage with this generation and know what to do. And instead of letting them shine their light, we were actively putting a lid on them. So from my perspective, in writing my book, I was looking at these things because I was engaging and I was managing teams of millennials and was observing some behaviors. Some of them were simply toxic behaviors because of where I was working. But, I worked really hard to arm them with the tools they needed to get to the places that they said they wanted to go. Some of them didn't want to do the work to get to that next thing. But then again, maybe I was, from a generational perspective, making them jump through hoops that they didn't think they needed to jump through. As I started my own business in 2019 and started thinking about writing a book, and the business was really focused around leadership development and culture, I started to identify some of these dynamics were potentially generational. So I started doing some work on that, doing research, understanding the Gen Z that's now entering the workforce. And by the way, everybody's complaining about everybody else. Every generation complains about the next one coming, which I actually found incredibly funny. But also, looking back on it, of course. And we're all coming from, different sets of circumstances. And one of the ways that generation is identified is growing up around a unifying event. And I'm speaking about Americans, so events that would happen in America, because our generations are distinct from other countries because other things happen other places. We grow up, so to speak, as a unit of people who have gone through a similar experience, and therefore our generation has been defined. And sometimes it's multiple things, but typically it's defined as one or two. And so we're talking about wars, and we know this from the perspective of World War I and World War II, and in between the Depression. So identifying these events does have a lot to do with who we are and how we present ourselves in the world. Of course, that's not the whole story. Of course, we are individuals. Of course, we're raised by different parents in a different socioeconomic status, in different homes, in different cities and states. So this is one piece of a really big puzzle. And so one of the things that made me focus on this was simply trying to unlock one piece of that. I felt like we all understand sort of on, not in a, I don't know if you listen to Hidden Brain. I love that show, where they dig in with research scientists on things that ways that we behave in the world. And I'm not talking about a scientific deep dive, but I'm talking about this need to be present and to figure out one piece at a time. And that presence is listening to the individual, is identifying the circumstance, is paying attention to what the big picture is. I'm as much a big picture person as I am a person in the details. And so I feel like I speak a lot of different languages. And I think we as women at work and maybe at home as well, are very highly adaptive and speak a lot of different languages. And we're constantly, whether we know it or not, putting these puzzles together about how to relate to human beings. So I just tried to put more form around it, I guess. That's my really long answer to your question.
What are differences between, say, because what you have said that you were looking at the differences in communication between Gen Xers and millennials. What's the difference there?
Well, I would say because I'm speaking from a Gen X perspective, and I'm like, a hair's breadth away from being a boomer. I learned to be direct, to ask questions. And so there's a part of me that expects people to ask more questions. And when I realized that they weren't asking a lot of questions, that they're positioning these Gen Y millennials were sort of positioned in this braced state of I need to show that I know everything. I need to show that I'm worth being promoted, and that seems like and promoted. I also want to add the caveat that millennials and Gen Z were raised with this notion that they needed to save the world. And so the only way to save the world is to put on the Superman suit. And I can't put on the Superman suit until you give it to me. And so some of that communication for me was I was having an expectation that they were going to ask more questions. And when they didn't ask questions, I started asking them questions about what did they want? What did they see themselves doing? And how I can help to get them there. And I think this is part of everybody's development, is to identify a mentor. And whether you're chosen or not, I feel like we all need to take the position of mentor to people. So I started asking more questions, and what came out was a much more vulnerable side than I expected, a much more vulnerable side than I would have brought to work. My vulnerability comes out maybe in humor, making fun of myself, a little bit of self-deprecating humor. But in this, folks, it can be pretty raw. I was brought on to a panel to speak with a bunch of venture capitalists and their entrepreneurs that they were funding. And the person who interviewed me before this was a self-identified millennial. She was totally fine with being called that. And she started out the whole conversation talking about how she's afraid of the dark, that her phone bill was still paid by her parents. She was in this very high marketing position with a very large venture capital firm. And I was absolutely shocked that this person just led with vulnerability. And so in terms of how to communicate, I felt like I had to match a little. So demonstrating my vulnerability alongside hers felt like the way to engage in that conversation so that it felt safe for her to talk with me. This is just one tiny example. They also and again, when I say they, this is a very general statement, really want to be part of that decision-making process. So however you include your millennial employees, or friends, or neighbors, part of that need is that connection. And so making a personal connection first is very, very important. And they want to know that they are making a difference at work. So they need more positive reinforcement than I think we ever did, or frankly, that we would ever admit to needing.
Or ever expect to get.
No, it was not normal to us to show any sense of vulnerability or to be needy in any way. And I've said this in the past, but I have an Italian mother and a Marine father. Everything in my household was pretty direct, and we had a lot of fun, and there was rigor in our household. That directness was not working for me in the same way as it had in the past. So being direct with millennials was almost felt to them, and I'm just completely going overboard by saying this, but a little abusive. Like they needed to feel appreciated, brought to the table, asked more questions, asked what do they think without having a filtered question about what do you think about having a 401k plan with an employer match? Like that's way too specific. What do you think about the benefits program? What would you like to see in our benefits program? Would be maybe a better question. I think we are in our directness, steer the conversation in the way that we know to steer it. And by asking more wide open questions, you're opening that collaboration and encouraging out of the box thinking. And I think that's a piece that really helps us in the innovative space.
When you ask that kind of question, then does the person answering assume that will happen, whatever they say?
That is the best question, Sarah, because this is exactly where we need to put our management skills to work. So that is, in my experience, that is the fear that we all have, is that if we're going to ask that question and it's open-ended, are we inviting a massive conversation that we cannot deliver on? So it's too scary to open that door, and I'm not going to ask that question. But things have changed. And I think part of, maybe there are a lot more committees in workplaces where people get together to solve a problem or identify a potential risk. A lot of it ends up being about employee retention, these committees, diversity, equity, and inclusion, food service programs at work. So people getting together in these small groups to solve these problems are a really great way of asking the question and then letting them talk it through and present something. Yes, and I do think we are beholden to some degree to listen to those conversations. I think asking one person, what do you think about this? Or asking 5 people, what do you think about this? And then they all agree on something, and suddenly you're responsible for making a complete directional change. I think what that actually does is open up a broader conversation and say, we seem to be missing the boat here. Like we're not on the same mode of transportation. So when you ask that question, I think we do need to be a little more brave about accepting the answers that we get.
I know when I was in corporate for all those years, I would say to, and this is reflecting my generation, I would say to different managers, well, if you ask those people what they think, you need to be prepared for the outcome. So make sure if you have no intention necessarily of doing what they say, but rather you making the decision after you hear everything, then make sure they know that in advance. That I'm going to make the decision, but I want to hear from you.
No, that's absolutely right, and that I was encouraged in the work world to do the same thing, but then I was seeing some leaders who are not at their best, left with that kind of decision, and the truth is, they weren't really listening to feedback. They had already decided. So the thing that I think is shocking, interesting, is that they think people don't already know that that's what's happening. People smell that a mile away. They're going to do whatever they want. This is an act of asking us what we want. They don't really care, so don't tell them the truth. It's the same thing. I'm not exactly the same thing, but when people leave businesses, there used to be these things, and there still are in some places, exit interviews, where you're supposed to talk about your experience of working there, what went well, what didn't go well. In the more toxic environments, more difficult environments where that would be useful, that's the most dangerous place to do an exit interview, right? That's the perception, that they left because their manager was poor, the dynamics in meetings were awful, expectations were not clearly stated, or expectations were out of line with reality, things like that would really help an organization. But people just can't get out of the door fast enough in those situations, and they're certainly not going to rat on anybody. So it's that the cycle of feedback is a totally different scenario that I'm absolutely fascinated by. I'm a truth teller, and I am pretty likely to say why I'm leaving places. If someone asks me, if they're not going to ask me, that's fine too. But I think that piece of the system is broken because people aren't hearing the things they need to hear in order to improve. And part of that is just simply not asking the questions.
One of the things that I'm interested in is in stuff I used to do. I would tell people when it was a cultural difference. I was teaching one thing, but people who were in the class were from a different culture, and it was against what their culture. And I would say to them, well, it depends on where you're going to do your work, and if you want to be successful. If you want to be successful in the West, in a corporation, then you probably need to do this, because that's what's considered to be appropriate, proper, and good behavior. If you are going to do your work somewhere else, then that's okay. So it depends on where you're going to do your work and whether or not you want to be successful. But I realized when I did that, I was encouraging them to buy into the cultural norms. And I was doing that because I knew that would help them be successful, and not doing that, they wouldn't be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's still a conundrum to me. There's no way possible to change all of the norms in large organizations to be more accepting of a variety of generational approaches to life. What do you advise millennials if they want to be successful?
Well, first of all, many millennials are successful.
Yeah.
So they're now and this is, I find this wildly amusing, in the same way that I'm sure people found my generation wildly not amusing, of latchkey kids. Millennials are really struggling with the next generation, Gen Z. They don't know how to work.
The millennials think Gen Zs don't know how to work.
Yes. And that it's unreasonable for Gen Zs to work when they want to. And, before COVID, there were a lot of places that saw this sort of hybrid, having some work from home days. It was very distasteful to them. It felt like, the inmates running the asylum, if you let them work from home, they're not going to do anything. We're all going to be just messing around, and nobody's going to get anything done. And we're not going to be able to reach each other. That was a lack of trust. It was a lack of the ability to see beyond what the norms are today. The norms today were you show up at 8, you leave at 5, 6, 7, whatever. But at the end of the day, you are there at 8. If you're there at 8:02, you're late every day. Well, we work from home and we sign on earlier because we don't have a commute. And then we start seeing maybe some benefits to productivity and maybe some downturns. But I guess the point is that the way we flex into change makes a big difference. And sometimes that change is put upon us. But again, these Gen Z were graduating from college around the time that COVID hit. And so they know how to be working online. They know how to attend classes. They know how to get work done. They know how to work in between those times. And they are sort of carrying that work into their jobs. You'll see, I don't know if anybody out there is active in job search, but you'll see all of the listings now say in office, hybrid, or work from home, because that's where we are today. Can you imagine applying for a job 5 years ago that was hybrid? Meaning
nobody would have
come into the office a couple days a week.
Nobody would have known what that meant, actually.
No, absolutely. That this next generation is doing to some degree the same thing that millennials did, and I'm going to use this term loosely, to the Gen X leadership that they had, and that is asking for what they need, asking for what it would take to do a good job for them. And then again, as individuals, some people really, really like being in an office and around people. Some people just really thrive on that. Other people, a little at a time is fine. So hybrid is good. Other people were perfectly happy staying at home all day long. So this is actually a good development, as long as you figure out how to make it work for your organization and what your deliverables are. So that's the work. And when you invite a new generation in to collaborate, and you still got on board a couple of generations ahead, that's a perfect group of people to solve problems. It's absolutely amazing from a business perspective to have all those voices at the table. And that's what we want.
Oh, that's just fascinating, Erin-Kate. We're way out of time, but I realize because of my generation, I totally understand how nice it is to be home and get a lot of work done. And I have spent my whole entire adult life on interpersonal communication and how important face-to-face communication is.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to build a team with trust and a culture with trust, where there's trust, you have to be face-to-face. And that, I know that that's so really outdated, but boy, I tell you, I probably will take that to the grave with me, because it is just so deep inside me. So we need people like you who are saying that is the best combination of workers to get problems solved, because for a lot of us, that is hard to understand. So we have to come to an end, Erin-Kate. This has been absolutely wonderful for me.
No. I miss you, Sarah.
So I know people are going to want to get in touch with you. How can they do that?
I have a website called www.working-courage.com. So you can hit the contact in there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Erin-Kate Whitcomb, Whitcomb. And I also, if you're interested in just learning a little bit more about the generational difference, I put together 4 chapters, non-linear, but chapters with tools that you can start using to, I guess, identify generational difference and places where you can help yourself and those around you to grow a little bit around that. And these are free chapters at working-courage.com/freebies. And just download that. It's just a PDF. And I hope you find it interesting and useful to you. I really want generational. I want to blur the lines between these generations a little bit more.
Thank you, Erin-Kate, and everybody. That's our time today. Please join us again. You can find our Prime Spark podcast on every popular outlet. Find out more about Prime Spark at primesparkwomen.com. Thank you so much to my guest, Erin-Kate Whitcomb. And don't forget, you can find her at working-courage.com. If you want the book, 4 chapters of this wonderful book, working-courage.com/freebies. So download.
Or you could buy the whole darn thing on Amazon.
Yeah, or you could buy the whole darn thing on Amazon. So thank you for being with us today. Spread tolerance and love. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to stay updated, you can head over to my website, primesparkwomen.com, and get my free Spark Guide, 7 questions to ignite your spark, to help you discover your own spark. See you in the next episode.